She was just a housekeeper doing her job when the millionaire's glamorous wife suddenly grabbed her by the collar and ripped her uniform in front of a room full of wealthy guests. Gasps echoed across the dining hall, but no one was prepared for what the millionaire himself did next. His reaction would turn the entire party upside down and forever change the fate of everyone in that mansion. The chandeliers glowed like golden suns above the grand Whitmore estate, their crystal arms scattering light across polished mahogany and velvet drapes. The scent of roasted duck, garlic butter, and freshly poured wine hung in the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of orchids that had been arranged in tall glass vases along the dining table. It was a scene designed to impress, and it did. Guests in silk gowns and tailored tuxedos whispered compliments about Isabella Whitmore's flawless taste, about Daniel Whitmore's empire, about the grace of a household that looked, on the surface, unshakable. But beneath the polish, there was Elena Carter, 26 years old, standing at the edge of the room in her neatly pressed gray uniform. Her dark hair was pinned back, her movements quiet but efficient. She carried herself with a dignity that made even her simplest actions appear deliberate. When she reached for a crystal glass, when she cleared a plate, her presence was subtle yet undeniable. Elena had spent 8 months working here, learning the rhythms of this mansion. When the kitchen grew loud with clattering pans, when Isabella rehearsed her smiles before a mirror, when little Sophie ran down marble hallways chasing her own laughter, Elena knew the house better than most, yet never forgot it wasn't her own. She moved like a respectful shadow, present but never intrusive. Still, she had noticed the way Daniel Whitmore's eyes sometimes lingered, not with desire, but with something Elena both treasured and feared: respect. He asked her opinions on paintings, listened when she spoke about books, even asked once about her night classes in business. Those small kindnesses, while innocent, placed her under Isabella's merciless gaze. Tonight, the pressure boiled over. As Elena reached for the final dessert plate, conversations rippled around her about hedge funds, gallery openings, and holiday villas in Tuscany. She thought of her grandmother back in a cramped apartment across town, watching old TV shows with the volume too high. Elena had promised herself she would finish her degree, start a career, climb out of service work. Each polished plate, each folded napkin was a rung on that ladder. Then Isabella's voice cut through the air. "Elena." The word struck like glass shattering. Every fork froze midair. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The flames of the candles seemed to lean toward her voice. Elena's hands trembled around the porcelain dish she carried. She set it down carefully, her pulse quickening. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore?" Her voice was soft, respectful, but it carried across the silence. "Come here, please." Isabella's smile curved like a knife. Elena stepped forward, feeling every eye on her. She wanted to shrink, to disappear between the marble tiles, but the gaze of the room pinned her like an insect under glass. The business moguls, their wives in diamond necklaces, all turned with barely veiled curiosity. Daniel sat at the head of the table, jaw tight. He knew his wife's tone. He had seen her wield charm like a sword, but never had she aimed it so openly at Elena. "My friend," Isabella said sweetly, rising to her feet. Her champagne dress shimmered under candlelight, but her eyes were sharp and merciless. "I believe we're witnessing something rather remarkable tonight. Our help seems to have forgotten her place." Elena's breath caught. Heat crawled up her neck. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but training and survival whispered, "Silence is safer." "Isabella," Daniel said sharply, his voice low but urgent. "This isn't the time." But Isabella's attention never left Elena. "Why not, darling? They should see." She circled Elena slowly, each step measured, predatory. "Tell me, Elena, do you enjoy walking through my halls as though you own them? Speaking to my husband as though you were his equal? Do you imagine yourself part of this family?" "I've never forgotten my place, Mrs. Whitmore," Elena whispered, Her fingers dug into her palms, leaving crescent moons on her skin. I only do my work. Isabella's laugh was brittle. Work? Yes. Polishing silver, arranging flowers, and stealing glances. Perhaps more. She leaned close enough for Elena to smell her perfume, sharp jasmine layered with something metallic. From the doorway came a small voice. Mom. Sophie Whitmore, 12 years old, stood frozen in her nightgown, eyes wide. She had heard enough to sense danger, but not enough to understand its cruel roots. Go to your room. Sophie, Daniel commanded. His voice cracked in a way that startled his daughter, but Sophie didn't move. Her gaze darted between her mother's fury and Elena's quiet anguish. Isabella saw the child, saw the audience she wanted most. Her smile stretched. Let me remind you, she said, voice dropping to a whisper that somehow filled the room. Exactly what you are in this house. Her hand shot out, grasping the collar of Elena's uniform. The cotton resisted, sturdy as the life Elena had built for herself through resilience. But Isabella's manicured fingers tugged, and the sound of fabric tearing sliced through the air like thunder. The room gasped as one. Mrs. Reynolds covered her mouth with her hand. Mr. Coleman coughed into his napkin, pretending not to watch but unable to look away. Elena staggered back, clutching the torn edges against her chest. Her shoulder was exposed, pale under the candlelight. Humiliation burned hotter than fire in her cheeks. She refused to cry. She would not give Isabella that victory. From the doorway, Sophie let out a broken sob. Why did you hurt her, Mom? Isabella ignored her daughter. She held the torn scrap of fabric aloft like evidence. This is what happens, she said coldly, when the help forgets themselves. The silence afterward was unbearable. Only Elena's ragged breathing filled the air. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at their plates. Others exchanged glances heavy with disapproval. And then Daniel Whitmore stood. The scrape of his chair against the marble floor was deafening. He rose to his full height, his face carved in stone. For a long moment, he said nothing. He only looked, first at his wife's triumphant expression, then at Elena's trembling form, then at the guests frozen in shock. Finally, he spoke. Isabella. Her name landed like a gavel. Isabella's victory faltered. She had expected silence, perhaps complicity. Not this. What you've done tonight, Daniel continued, his voice steady and low, is unforgivable. The words rippled through the room. Mrs. Reynolds gasped audibly. Mr. Coleman nearly spilled his wine. Isabella's painted face drained of color. Richard, you don't understand. No, Daniel cut in, sharper than a blade. You don't understand. Elena Carter is not a prop in your play. She is not your scapegoat. She is a human being, and she deserves respect you clearly do not know how to give. Elena's knees weakened. She had braced herself for silence, maybe even dismissal. Never had she imagined this. Tears slipped free, but this time they were not born of shame. They came from the shock of being defended. Daniel stepped forward. He shrugged off his tailored dinner jacket, its fabric smooth, smelling faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. Gently, he placed it around Elena's shoulders, covering her exposed skin. I am sorry, he murmured, low enough only she could hear. You should never have been treated this way. Not in my house, not anywhere. Elena's lips parted, but no words came. The weight of his protection felt both comforting and dangerous, like standing in the eye of a storm. To the guests, Daniel raised his voice. Forgive this interruption. My wife has forgotten herself tonight. Isabella's mouth fell open. Her carefully crafted image was unraveling. Gasps and whispers buzzed through the guests like bees in a shaken hive. How dare you, she hissed at him. How dare you humiliate me for her? The only one humiliated here, Daniel said evenly, is Elena, and you are responsible. From the doorway, Sophie cried louder. Why did you hurt her? Mom, she repeated, voice trembling but clear enough for every adult to hear. The child's words landed heavier than any reprimand. Isabella staggered back, her armor of pride cracking. For the first time, her audience was not allies, not strangers, but her daughter, watching cruelty dressed as strength. Daniel placed a steady hand on Elena's shoulder. His stance was protective, immovable. Around them, the grandeur of the dining hall seemed suddenly hollow, its chandeliers, silverware, and orchids no match for the raw truth laid bare. The guests rose awkwardly, murmuring excuses. Mrs. Reynolds pressed a business card into Elena's hand as she passed. "Call me," she whispered. Dr. Hughes offered a grave nod. Others avoided Isabella's gaze entirely. The door shut behind the last of them. Silence fell heavier than before. Only the crackle of candle flames remained. Daniel turned to Elena. His eyes softened. "Stay, please, we need to talk." Elena clutched the jacket tighter. Her uniform was torn, but her dignity, though shaken, remained unbroken. She nodded slowly, knowing her life had just changed forever. And Isabella? She stood apart, trembling in the ruins of her own making. For the first time in years, the queen of the Whitmore estate found herself dethroned, not by another woman, but by the truth she had tried to bury. The last click of the door echoed like the toll of a bell. The Whitmore dining hall, once filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and polite applause, now stood in heavy silence. The candles on the long mahogany table still flickered, but their light felt cold, their warmth stolen by what had just unfolded. The silver gleamed too brightly, like it mocked the ruin of the evening. Elena Carter stood near the end of the table, Daniel's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. The fabric was far too large, its sleeves falling past her hands, but it shielded her from the chill that seeped into her bones. Her heart pounded in her chest, uneven and frantic. She could still hear the rip of fabric in her ears, that humiliating sound echoing louder than any applause she had ever dreamed of earning in life. Daniel Whitmore remained standing at the head of the table, tall and immovable, his expression unreadable. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on Isabella. Sophie hovered near the doorway, her small fists clenched, her young face streaked with tears she didn't understand but couldn't stop. Isabella stood opposite them all, her champagne dress still gleaming, but her aura shattered. Her breathing came in sharp bursts, like a runner who had sprinted too far. She looked less like the poised hostess of the city's elite and more like a cornered animal, her eyes darting between her husband, her daughter, and the woman who stood wrapped in his jacket. The weight of it pressed down on everyone. "Daddy!" Sophie's voice broke first. The child stepped forward, tugging lightly at Daniel's sleeve. "Why did Mom hurt Elena?" The question was simple, but it landed like a blade. Isabella flinched. "Sophie, go upstairs. This is not for children." But Sophie didn't move. Her chin wobbled, and her eyes, wide and wet, looked between her mother and Elena. She didn't do anything wrong. She was just helping. Daniel crouched slightly, placing one steady hand on his daughter's shoulder. His tone softened for her. "Sweetheart, sometimes adults make mistakes, big mistakes, but I promise you, Elena did nothing to deserve this." Elena's throat tightened. She had endured humiliation, survived insult, but hearing Daniel defend her in front of his daughter stirred something deeper, something dangerous. She wanted to speak, to absolve the child of confusion, but her voice caught. "Is that what I am to you now, Daniel?" Isabella's voice sliced through the room. It was sharp, but underneath trembled desperation. "A mistake?" Daniel stood again, slowly, deliberately. "No, Isabella. What you did tonight was the mistake." Isabella's painted lips trembled. "I was protecting us, protecting our marriage, our family, our reputation. By tearing apart another human being?" Daniel's voice cracked with restrained fury. "By humiliating someone who has done nothing but serve this house with dignity?" Elena shifted uncomfortably, her hands gripping the jacket tighter. "Mr. Whitmore," she whispered, "perhaps I should go. This, this is a family matter." "No," Daniel said firmly, turning to her. "You are part of this conversation. What happened to you tonight happened in my home, under my roof. I allowed it to go this far by ignoring warning signs. That's on me." His admission stunned her. Elena lowered her gaze, torn between gratitude and fear. Isabella let out a bitter laugh. "Warning signs, Daniel? You've been blinded. Can't you see how she looks at you? How you look at her?" "I look at her with respect," he shot back. "The same respect I give any person who deserves it. If you see threat in that, then the problem lies with your insecurities, not her presence." The word insecurities landed like a slap. Isabella staggered a step back, her eyes flashing with hurt. No one had ever dared to name her fear so plainly. She turned away, facing the grand mirror that hung above the fireplace. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the flawless hostess, the perfect wife, the unshakable queen of high society. It was a woman unraveling, her mask slipping. Sophie clung to her father's side, but her young voice piped again, piercing the tension. "What does insecure mean?" The innocence of the question struck like a hammer. Daniel knelt again, brushing his daughter's hair back gently. "It means when someone is afraid of losing what they have, afraid someone else might take it away." Sophie frowned. "But Elena doesn't take things. She helps. She makes me hot chocolate when I'm sad. She reads with me. She's nice." Each word was like a nail hammered into Isabella's chest. She spun around, her voice rising, desperate. "Do you hear that, Daniel? She's not just the help anymore. She's wormed her way into Sophie's heart, into yours, and you let it happen." "I let kindness happen," Daniel said coldly. The room trembled with silence again. Elena's eyes stung. She thought of her grandmother, frail and tired in that small apartment, always telling her, "Hold your head high. Lena, they can take your money, your job, even your clothes, but never your dignity." Tonight, Isabella had tried to rip it away, and yet somehow, standing here in Daniel's jacket, with Sophie's innocent defense echoing in the room, Elena realized her grandmother had been right. Still, her heart was heavy. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said softly, turning toward Isabella, "I never meant to come between you and your family. I only wanted to do my job. If my presence here causes so much pain, I can find another position." "See?" Isabella latched onto the words like a lifeline. "Even she knows she doesn't belong here." But Daniel's voice cut her down again. "No, she's not leaving. Not after what she's endured. Elena has done nothing wrong, and she won't be punished for your fears." His words filled the hall with finality. Isabella's hands shook at her sides. For years, she had built her identity on control, controlling her image, her household, her place in society. Now, for the first time, the foundation cracked. The cracks spread through the marble hallways, through the golden chandeliers, through her very sense of self. The silence stretched. The orchids in their vases seemed too bright, their petals mocking. Finally, Isabella whispered, broken and small, "You've chosen her over me." Daniel closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, his voice was steady, though lined with sorrow. "I've chosen what's right." The words cut deeper than any scream. Isabella stumbled, clutching the back of a chair, her body trembling with rage, fear, and heartbreak. Sophie's small hand tugged Daniel's sleeve tighter, as if grounding him. Elena stood frozen, the jacket heavy on her shoulders, her mind reeling. She had stepped into this household as a housekeeper, invisible, replaceable. Tonight, she stood at the fault line of a family's collapse. The night wasn't over, and the aftershocks would shake more than just marble floors. The grand dining room felt colder than stone. The chandeliers still glowed, But their brilliance no longer dazzled. Instead, it illuminated the fractures spreading invisibly through the Whitmore family. Elena Carter stood wrapped in Daniel's jacket, her heart hammering, her breath unsteady. Sophie clung to her father's side, her small frame trembling, while Isabella hovered across the table, her poise shattered into shards too sharp to hold. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence itself had teeth. Daniel finally exhaled, a long, deliberate breath. He looked at Elena, her downcast eyes, her trembling hands clutching the jacket, and then at Isabella, whose chest rose and fell with uneven fury. "This can't go on," he said, his voice low but carrying through the room like a verdict. Isabella let out a brittle laugh. "What can't go on, Daniel? You treating a servant like a queen? You humiliating me in my own home?" "No," he answered, his jaw tight. "You humiliating yourself. Tonight should have been about business, about showing our guests the strength of this family. Instead, you chose cruelty. And for what?" Isabella's eyes flashed. "For us. To protect us. You don't see it, but she's become too close. You look at her the way you used to look at me." Elena's breath caught, shame burning her skin. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the polished floors. She whispered, "Mr. Whitmore, I never—" Daniel raised a hand gently, stopping her. "Elena, none of this is your fault. You've done nothing but serve with grace." His voice softened, but his eyes never left his wife's. "Isabella, this obsession of yours is poisoning everything." Sophie looked up, confusion etched across her young face. "Daddy, are you and Mom fighting because of Elena?" Daniel knelt, pulling his daughter close. He spoke gently, but his words were plain. "Sweetheart, we're fighting because sometimes grown-ups forget what matters most. Kindness, respect, telling the truth. Elena hasn't done anything wrong." Sophie sniffled, wiping her tears on the sleeve of his shirt. Her next words were quiet, but cut through the silence. "I don't want Elena to leave. She makes me feel safe." Elena's knees wobbled. She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back tears. No one had ever said that to her, not since her grandmother, the woman who raised her. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, rough from years of cigarettes and hard living. "Dignity, Lena. That's all you carry with you when the world tries to strip you bare. Dignity and the strength to keep going." Elena whispered now, mostly to herself. "I can't stay if I'm tearing this family apart." Daniel rose, steady and resolute, his gaze locked on her. "You're not tearing us apart. You've revealed what was already breaking." Isabella's lips parted, a protest caught in her throat. Daniel turned to Elena fully, his voice ringing with a decision that seemed to crystallize in that very moment. "Elena Carter, I won't let you leave this house with only humiliation as your memory. You've sacrificed. You've worked harder than anyone I know. I know your story, working 2 jobs while studying at night, caring for your grandmother, and I won't stand by while that strength goes unrecognized." Elena blinked, stunned. "Mr. Whitmore." "Daniel," he corrected softly. Then, louder, with conviction, "I will personally fund your education. Full tuition. Every book, every fee. You'll finish your degree without worry. And when you graduate, you'll have a place in my company waiting for you." The words fell into the room like thunder. Elena's lips parted in disbelief. What? No, I can't accept." "You can, and you will," Daniel said firmly, "because you've earned it, because you deserve better than this." A jacket around her shoulders suddenly felt heavier, as though stitched with the weight of 100 futures. Elena's chest tightened, her thoughts colliding in a storm. She imagined her grandmother's small kitchen, the stacks of bills on the counter, the unpaid prescriptions. She imagined late nights studying under dim light, exhaustion clawing at her bones. And now freedom dangled in front of her like a rope out of a well. But Isabella exploded. Are you insane? You're offering her, a scholarship, a position in your company, over your own wife? Daniel's head snapped toward her. This isn't about choosing her over you. It's about doing what's right, something you've forgotten how to do. Isabella's chest heaved. Right? You call this right? Elevating the help, humiliating your wife, destroying our reputation in one night? Sophie tugged on her mother's dress, her voice small but piercing. Mom, Elena isn't bad. She's nice. Please don't be mean to her anymore. The innocence in her tone broke what little strength Isabella had left. For a moment, her face softened, almost crumpling, but pride snapped her back. You've bewitched my daughter too, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. Daniel's patience snapped. His tone was iron. Enough, Isabella. If showing basic decency looks like betrayal to you, then the betrayal is in your own heart. The room quaked with his words. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts. She wanted to refuse, to step back, to vanish from this battlefield of love and resentment. But Sophie's small hand reached for hers, clutching her fingers with desperate warmth. Please don't go. Elena, we need you. The words melted every defense she had. She knelt, looking into Sophie's wide eyes. Sweetheart, I'll never stop caring for you, but sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. Sophie's grip tightened. Then choose us. The child's plea twisted something deep inside her. Elena swallowed hard, tears blurring her vision. Isabella's voice trembled, breaking. You see? Even my daughter replaces me with her. Even you, Daniel, choose her. Daniel shook his head slowly, sorrow heavy in his gaze. No, Isabella, I'm choosing truth. You need help, and I hope you find it. But tonight, you've crossed every line. Isabella stumbled back, her world collapsing. The chandeliers, the orchids, the silver. None of it shielded her now. She turned, retreating toward the staircase, her heels striking the marble like hammers. At the base of the stairs, she paused, looking back with hollow eyes. One day, Daniel, you'll regret this. Then she vanished up the staircase, her shadow swallowed by the darkness. The silence left behind was crushing. Elena stood frozen, Daniel's jacket still around her shoulders, Sophie clinging to her hand. Her mind whirled, her heart raced. The promise Daniel had spoken still echoed. A scholarship, a future, dignity restored. But beneath it all lingered the dangerous truth that her presence had torn open fault lines too deep to ignore. Daniel's gaze softened as he looked at her. You don't have to decide tonight, but know this. You are worth more than what happened here. Elena's tears spilled freely now, hot trails down her cheeks. She whispered, Thank you for seeing me. Sophie wrapped her arms around her waist, holding tight. Please stay. Elena held the child close, her heart aching. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, but becoming above them. The house creaked, echoing Isabella's footsteps retreating into solitude. But beneath them, something new was stirring. The old order had shattered, and from its ruins, a choice awaited, one that would determine not just Elena's future, but the fate of the Whitmore family itself. The Whitmore estate had never felt so hollow. For years, its marble floors had echoed with polite conversation. Its chandeliers had glittered above endless soiree. Its grand staircase had carried Isabella Whitmore down to thunderous applause from guests. But now the same marble seemed to groan beneath the weight of silence. The chandeliers flickered without warmth, and the staircase, where Isabella had once descended as queen, now felt like the spine of a house turning its back on her. Isabella locked herself in the master bedroom that night. The scent of champagne still clung to her silk gown, but it no longer smelled like triumph. She sat before the gilded mirror, staring at a reflection she barely recognized. The woman looking back had eyes smeared with mascara, lips trembling, shoulders hunched. For years, she had worn perfection like armor. Tonight, the armor had cracked. She touched her face with manicured fingers, as if searching for the woman she had been taught to be. Daughter of the Aldridges, wife of Daniel Whitmore, mistress of this house. Titles whispered to her since childhood. But the titles had done nothing to stop her husband from siding with a servant. Her mind twisted, replaying the dinner over and over. Elena's wide, tearful eyes. Sophie clinging to her. Daniel's voice sharp and unforgiving. What you have done is unforgivable. The words drilled into her like nails. By dawn, Isabella still hadn't slept. She rose, paced the room, and poured herself brandy, though the clock had barely struck 6. Each sip burned, but not enough to erase the echo of her daughter's voice. Why did you hurt her? Mom. That question haunted her worse than Daniel's condemnation. Downstairs, life resumed. Mrs. Alvarez, the cook, prepared breakfast quietly, her eyes red from what she had witnessed. Jack Miller, the groundskeeper, worked longer hours outside, perhaps to avoid the tension thickening the halls. The staff spoke less, their footsteps softer, as if afraid to draw Isabella's ire again. Yet, when Elena entered the kitchen, they straightened with quiet respect. They saw her differently now. Elena moved carefully, aware of the eyes upon her. The torn uniform had been discarded, replaced with another, but the memory of that fabric ripping lingered in every stitch. Daniel's jacket had been returned, folded neatly, though part of her still felt its weight on her shoulders. Mrs. Alvarez squeezed Elena's hand while handing her a tray of tea. Mija, she whispered, hold your head high. You showed more strength than all of them put together. Elena forced a small smile, her throat tight. I don't feel strong. You don't need to feel it, Mrs. Alvarez replied, her voice rough with age. You just need to live it. Strength is what others see when you keep going. Upstairs, Sophie knocked timidly at Elena's small quarters tucked behind the laundry wing. The girl's hair was messy from sleep, her eyes still swollen. She carried a crumpled drawing in her hands. I made this for you, she said shyly. Elena knelt, smoothing the paper. It was a child's sketch of 3 figures, one tall with broad shoulders, labeled Dad, one small with curls, labeled Me, and one with dark hair in a simple dress, labeled Elena. They stood under a roof, smiling. Off to the side, a 4th figure was scribbled in darker colors, isolated, labeled only Mom. Elena's chest ached. Sophie, you love your mom too, don't you? The girl bit her lip. I don't like when she's mean, but I want her to be happy again. Elena hugged her gently. Maybe one day she will be. Sometimes people just need help finding their way back. Meanwhile, Daniel buried himself in work at his study. Contracts and portfolios lay spread across his desk, but his eyes often drifted to the window overlooking the garden. He thought of Elena's trembling hands, Isabella's rage, Sophie's tears. Guilt gnawed at him. He had ignored Isabella's pettiness for months, dismissing it as harmless vanity. Tonight had shown him the cost of silence. He leaned back, whispering to himself, respect costs nothing, but I let it slip too far. That evening, Isabella finally emerged, her face pale but composed. She found Daniel in the study, his reading glasses perched on his nose, papers stacked neatly. We need to talk, she said, her voice hoarse. Daniel removed his glasses slowly. Yes, we do. Her arms crossed, defensiveness rising. You humiliated me last night. You humiliated yourself, he replied evenly. And worse, you humiliated Elena. Isabella stopped, her voice faltering. For the first time, the word help stuck in her throat. She's beneath us, or she should be. Daniel's eyes hardened. Do you hear yourself? You sound like the very people you used to criticize when we first met. The world you swore you'd rise above." Isabella flinched. Memories surged. She had been raised in wealth. Yes, but it had been a gilded cage. Parents who measured love in etiquette lessons, who silenced her with pearls and piano keys. She had married Daniel to escape, believing love and freedom waited beyond her family's cold halls. Yet somewhere along the way, she had become them. Her voice cracked. "I was afraid." Daniel leaned forward. "Afraid of what?" "Of losing everything," she whispered. "Of losing you. Of Sophie looking at someone else the way she used to look at me." Her shoulders slumped. "I thought if I destroyed Elena, I'd feel safe again." The confession hung in the room. Daniel's voice softened, though it carried disappointment. "You don't need to destroy others to feel safe. Isabella, you need to face yourself." Her eyes welled with tears. "And if I can't, then you'll lose us anyway." For the first time in years, Isabella felt truly small. Not in status, not in wealth, but in soul. Days turned into weeks. Isabella withdrew, sometimes wandering the garden aimlessly, sometimes staring at old photographs of her and Daniel's early years. The staff avoided her, their respect eroded. Sophie, once her shadow, now clung to Elena, laughter echoing in the kitchen when Elena helped with homework or taught her Spanish phrases she picked up from Mrs. Alvarez. One night, unable to bear the loneliness, Isabella sought help. A friend recommended a therapist, Dr. Evans, discreet and respected. Sitting in his office surrounded by muted earth tones, she admitted what she had never said aloud. "I don't know who I am without perfection, and when I saw Elena, I saw everything I'm not anymore." Dr. Evans leaned forward. "And did that make you want to destroy her, or to be her?" Isabella froze. The question pierced her. She realized she had envied Elena's quiet dignity, something money could never buy. Meanwhile, Elena's life tilted. Daniel called her into his study one evening, offering a thick folder of university papers. "The scholarship application is complete. All that's left is your signature." Her hands shook as she held the pen. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You've been ready your whole life," Daniel said softly. Sophie bounced at Elena's side. "Sign it. Sign it. Then you'll be a businesswoman, and maybe I can work with you one day." Elena laughed through tears, the sound fragile but real. She signed. That night, lying in her small room, she stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she dared to imagine a future not defined by servitude, but by choice. Yet guilt tugged at her. Was she taking too much from Daniel? From this fractured family? In another wing of the house, Isabella sat awake, staring at the empty side of her bed. She whispered to herself, as if confessing to the dark, "If I don't change, I'll lose them. All of them." The house groaned with secrets. The chandeliers glittered. The orchids bloomed. The marble floors shone. But beneath the grandeur, cracks widened. The Whitmore family was no longer what it had been. And at the center of it all stood Elena, the housekeeper who had become the mirror no one asked for, but everyone needed. 6 months passed. Yet the night of the dinner party still haunted the Whitmore estate like a lingering shadow. The chandeliers had been polished. The silver gleamed as always. The orchids changed with the seasons. But beneath all the perfection, something fundamental had shifted. The family was no longer built on appearances alone. It was cracking open, raw, uncomfortable, and somehow more real than ever before. Elena Carter's life had changed in ways she never dared dream. Each morning she woke at the same hour, but instead of preparing uniforms and trays, she sat at a desk stacked with textbooks. Papers scattered with handwritten notes replaced folded napkins. The aroma of highlighters and coffee replaced the scent of polish and wax. She still worked part-time in the estate, helping Mrs. Alvarez in the kitchen, tutoring Sophie after school. But the bulk of her energy was spent on lectures, projects, exams. The scholarship Daniel had promised was real. He had signed every check, spoken to every administrator, removed every obstacle. "You've already proven your worth," he told her the day she walked into her first class. "Now you just need the world to see it." At first, Elena felt like an imposter among younger students who didn't carry years of labor in their hands. But when she spoke up in class about business models, about strategies she had seen fail or succeed in real life, her professors listened. Slowly, confidence bloomed. In the evenings, Sophie waited eagerly at the kitchen table, books spread wide. "Teach me like your professors teach you," she'd beg, her curls bouncing. Elena laughed softly, explaining concepts in simpler terms, turning homework into games. Daniel often stood in the doorway, watching silently, his chest tightening at the sight of his daughter's joy. Isabella's journey was slower, darker. Therapy had become her weekly ritual, though at first she resented it. She sat stiff in Dr. Evans's leather chair, arms crossed, lips pursed. "I don't need fixing," she insisted. "No," Dr. Evans replied calmly, "but perhaps you need understanding. From yourself, most of all." Bit by bit, the layers peeled away. Isabella confessed her fears of aging, of irrelevance, of being replaced by a younger, kinder woman. "I used to be the center," she whispered once, tears staining her silk blouse. "Now my daughter runs to her, my husband shields her, and I'm excess." Dr. Evans leaned forward. "You're not excess, Isabella, but you've mistaken control for love. Real love isn't earned by tearing others down. It's given freely, and it can be rebuilt, if you're willing." Some days Isabella left his office furious, other days trembling, but slowly cracks in her armor became openings. She began apologizing, haltingly, to the staff she had once criticized. "Mrs. Alvarez received the first. I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did." The older woman simply nodded, not forgiving yet, but acknowledging the attempt. The greatest challenge was Sophie. The girl avoided her at first, slipping away to Elena's side, answering Isabella with shrugs. One night, Isabella sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, hands twisting nervously. "Sophie, I know I hurt people. I know I hurt you. I don't want to be that mother anymore." Sophie's big eyes searched hers. "Will you stop being mean to Elena?" The question cut deep, but Isabella forced herself to answer. "Yes, I will try every day to be better. For her, for Dad, for you." For the first time in months, Sophie leaned against her, small and hesitant, but real. Isabella closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her face. And then came the day that changed everything. Elena's graduation. The State University auditorium buzzed with hundreds of families, cameras flashing, bouquets of flowers in every hand. Elena sat among rows of black caps and gowns, her heart pounding. She touched the tassel on her cap, still disbelieving. 6 months ago, she was just a housekeeper scrubbing silver. Now she was about to walk across a stage with honors. Backstage, she thought of her grandmother, who had passed just weeks before. The old woman hadn't lived to see this day, but Elena carried her words like armor. Dignity, Lena, never let them tear it away. When her name was called, Elena Carter, summa cum laude, the audience erupted. She stepped onto the stage, her gown swishing around her legs, the lights blinding, the applause deafening. She accepted the diploma with shaking hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. In the crowd, Sophie jumped to her feet, cheering wildly. "That's my Elena," she shouted, her voice piercing the hall. Daniel clapped with steady pride, his eyes shining. Even Isabella stood, her hands trembling, but clapping nonetheless. For once, the applause wasn't about appearances, it was about truth. After the ceremony, Outside, beneath blooming cherry trees, families clustered for photos. Sophie ran into Elena's arms, nearly knocking her over. You did it! You're a real businesswoman now. Elena laughed through tears. Not yet, sweetheart. But soon. Daniel approached, his suit crisp, his pride unmistakable. He held out a leather folder. Your contract, he said simply. Inside was an official offer, an executive training position at Whitmore Enterprises. Elena's breath caught. Daniel, this is too much. It's exactly what you deserve, he replied. I told you 6 months ago. You've already proven your worth. This just puts it in writing. For a moment, Elena was speechless. Then, slowly, she reached out and took the folder. Behind them, Isabella stood apart, holding a bouquet of lilies. Her face was pale and uncertain. When Elena turned, their eyes met. An awkward silence stretched. Finally, Isabella stepped forward. These are for you, she said quietly, holding out the flowers. I know I can never erase what I did, but I'm proud of you. Elena hesitated, then accepted the bouquet. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. Isabella's voice cracked. Just Isabella. The small concession carried the weight of months of therapy, reflection, change. Sophie slipped between them, grabbing both their hands, beaming. See? We're all okay now. The three stood together under the blossoms, the past heavy but no longer suffocating. That night, back at the estate, the family gathered in the dining room again. But this time, no chandeliers, no guests, no silver displays, just pizza boxes on fine china, sodas poured into crystal glasses, laughter echoing off marble walls. Elena sat between Sophie and Isabella, the diploma resting on the table beside the paper plates. Daniel raised a glass. To dignity, he said, to respect, and to second chances. They clinked glasses, the sound bright and pure. For Elena, the torn uniform of that terrible night was gone, but its memory remained. It had become a symbol, not of shame, but of resilience. She had learned that dignity cannot be torn, not by silk-clad cruelty, not by the weight of wealth, not by fear. It lives in the choices we make, in the way we rise after being broken. The Whitmores had been changed, each in their own way. Sophie had learned that kindness matters more than status. Daniel had learned the cost of silence. Isabella had begun the long, painful road of rebuilding. And Elena had stepped into her future, not as a servant, but as a woman who had earned her place in the world. The chandeliers above glittered softly, but for once, they didn't matter. The true light in the Whitmore home came from something money could never buy.